Hello painting class. Today we are going to discuss color theory as well as how to use our watercolors. As far as color theory goes, there is the tab on the Curriculum Painting 1 website that discusses the color wheel and all the other avenues of how color theory works, which we will discuss in class. But basic rundown, you have your color wheel. We have the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. When you mix those together, you get your secondary colors. Red and yellow make orange, red and blue make violet, blue and yellow make green. Then in between those steps, you have your intermediate or tertiary colors. Yellow orange, red violet, blue green, and yellow green. First off, we're going to understand how watercolor works as far as transparency and opaqueness go. Then we will discuss how to make those intermediate tertiary colors within the color wheel, because as you see, you only have the primary and secondary colors in your watercolor palette, as well as brown and black. So you'll learn how to make those 6 interchangeable steps. And then finally, we will discuss the idea of mixing complementary colors to get a neutral gray. So if you mix red and green, you would get a gray. If you mix orange and blue, you'd get the gray, and yellow and violet, you get gray. Those are complementary colors. They're across each other on the color wheel. If I were to draw a line straight from red to green, I will cross over the gray. Same thing with orange to blue, and same thing with violet to yellow. They all intersect and are complements to one another and create that neutral gray. The supplies you're going to have, you have your watercolor pad, you have your painting palette, you have your paper towel, cup of water, and the lid of your painting palette. Some of you have it connected, and that's where we'll do our color mixing. You also have your variety of brushes. There are tip brushes, round tip brushes that come to a point, and then you also have your flat edge brushes. Okay? Throughout the school year, we'll talk about how the different brushes can achieve different things. Today, we are going to focus on using the flat edge brush, the largest one you have, which is 12. Okay? The bigger the number on the brush, the bigger the bristles on the end. Okay? These are long handle brushes, so you have a lot of room to work with. If you want to hold it back here and be more loose, if you want to be more close and have more control over the brush, that is what the ability of the long handle brush is for. Okay? Today we're going to kind of focus on using it around this general area by the crimp of the metal to the wood handle, and once again a flat edge brush to create nice boxes. Now I've already kind of got one started, so this is what we're going to focus on. I'm going to show you how to do it, and we're understanding the idea of transparent to opaque. A lot of water mixed with our watercolor, a little bit of water and more pigment. Okay, all these cakes have pigment in them to create the color that they are. So when we get to more opaque, you have more pigment and more paint, less water. And then when we go transparent, you have more water, less pigment or paint. You're going to create 7 boxes. I want to see odd number boxes on what we do today. We're going to break your first page in your palette into 3 kind of sections. So you can see here how we have, we're going to do one section at the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom. We're going to do transparent and opaque, complementary colors, and tertiary or intermediate colors. So you're going to make 7 boxes in each row. So just kind of eyeball where you're going to put the idea of transparent to opaque at the top. The middle will deal with color mixing of tertiary colors, and then somewhere at the bottom we'll do complementary colors. But I want them to all kind of flow. You don't have to measure it out unless you want to, but we're going to aim to have 7 boxes. So with that odd number, there'll be one right down the middle, and that'll be really key on complementary colors and tertiary intermediate colors. Top, not so much, but it does kind of give us a good range of where the middle is, with half water and half paint versus more paint and versus more water. Okay, so how we're going to accomplish that is with our flat edge brush. Using the flat edge brush, we can get nice boxes like were showcased on the example I just showed you. My favorite color is blue, so I already did blue on that example, so I'm going to try a different color just to give you a gist of what others will look like. I'm going to focus on not using brown or black. We're only going to use the colors that are located in the color wheel, please. So no brown and no black for this step of the way. I'm going to go with orange. How about that? Blue's complementary color is orange, so we'll go with that. We always start with water on our brush, okay? You can't, if I touch these watercolors, nothing happens when they're dry, okay? Water reconstitutes it and gets it going, so we want to make sure we're adding water to our watercolor cakes. We also want to make sure, this doesn't really matter right now since you're only using one color, but you want to absolutely positively make sure you never mix the colors together in the palette itself. That's what the lid is for. So if I were mixing green and yellow together, I wouldn't mix the green into the yellow directly on this area. I would take some of each color and mix that in the top, which I will showcase for you after this portion. So I've got water on my brush, maybe take a little bit off, and I said I was going to do orange, so I'm going to do a few strokes into the orange, and then I'm going to take that into the lid. Now it looks pretty aggressively orange here, and I only know that because I know how to handle the materials. So I'm going to dip more water, and when you are working with transparency as far as your watercolors go, you want to make sure you definitely start that way, because if you start with too much paint, you can't remove it with watercolor, and you can't fix those mistakes. So we got to be very careful with how we work our watercolor, and always start transparent and then work our way to opaque, because you can't go opaque to transparent, but you can go transparent to opaque, which I will show you. Once again, opaque being the darker. I can't make that lighter. Also notice that in your palette you don't have any white paint. The white paint is the paper. Okay, so when I say that with transparent, you can still see kind of white showing through. You can see these little gaps here, which is called negative space. That is the white paint at this point in time. Okay, so there's going to be no white paint. You're going to have to make the white out of the paper by making things transparent or avoiding areas, kind of like how you see in these in-between stages. So I've got quite a bit of water. We want to start with the transparent first. I've got quite a bit of water mixed with my pigment or my orange paint. Okay, maybe a little bit more just to be safe, because I can always add more layers of paint, but once again we can't go in reverse. Now you've got these little divots on your paint palette to scrape off any excess moisture and paint, and now nice and flat with the brush to then work our way in. Once again, we're using a flat edge brush so we can create those nice boxes. If I'm going left to right, or kind of with the top of the box, I would go kind of left to right, and then the sides of the box I can go up and down and make those nice squares. Okay, so you're just going to kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we want to make sure we're doing it somewhere in the top region of our paper, because once again there'll be something else in the middle and something else at the bottom. So I've got my paint on my brush, took off any excess, coming in here and making a box big enough but small enough so we can fit 7 total. If you want to again map it out, use a ruler and space things out because you're a perfectionist like that and you like things nice and clean, by all means go for that, but you don't necessarily have to. Okay, nice and transparent. There's a little bit of extra kind of orange going on right there, so I'm going to take a little bit off and just kind of even that out with my brush. I wiped off all the excess paint. Okay, nice and transparent. It's kind of hard to see through the camera, but that's good because that means we've gone good and transparent. Okay, now I'm going to come in, get my brush a little bit more wet with the paint that I already have, get a little bit more pigment, mix it in with the area I already have, take a little excess off, make sure you have thoroughly mixed it with the water. Now I'm going to come in and make my second box next to my first box. Once again, see how I pulled down to get that straight vertical line? Then I rotate my hand left to right to get that side to side line, or horizontal line. Then I come down and go across, and then I can fill in the gap while it's still wet. We'll talk about that in some projects to come, how you want to work wet with wet. in watercolor at times, but then other times you don't. But we'll get there. Okay, now this one is a little bit more dark or opaque, less transparent. Maybe take a little bit of the color and liquid off the brush and even out that little excess paint right there. And we can see how that second orange box is darker than the first. Okay, now I'm going to come in, get moisture on my brush again, add more pigment or color, mix that back in with my water. I think I got a little too much paint, so I'm going to add a little bit more water, clean off my brush a little bit so it's not too wet and gloppy. And I'm going to come in and add my third box, once again pulling down towards me, pushing out to the right, rotating again, pulling down towards me, and pulling to the right or left, doesn't matter. But pulling towards you, you have more control than pushing out, so be understanding of that. Okay, now these two boxes look pretty the same, so what I can do now is add more layers and or add more pigment, but I'm going to let that dry because if we overwork too much on our paper, it's going to start to tear the paper and create those little fuzzies, if you will, and that's not what we want. So what I'm going to do now is just move on to the second box and then understand that I need to make this one a little bit darker. I'm going to grab some more moisture once again, mix it with more pigment, mix that back in with the water in the little section I have for my orange, take off any excess. I'm going to come in, create my middle box. Once again, we're doing 7 boxes, so this is my middle. 3 will be on this side, 3 will be on that side, 7 will be right in the middle. Create a nice square. Okay, now we can definitely see how that one's darker than that one. Maybe take a little bit excess water and paint off with my paper towel and even out the excess water and paint on that box. Now I know that this one once again needed to be darker a little bit, so I'm going to grab some water, grab just a touch of the pigment because I'm going to build up a second layer, and when you continually build up layers, then it's going to get more opaque or darker. So I'm going to make sure that this is kind of watered down. We don't want to overdo it because then it'll be too close to that box. So I can develop that second layer right on top. Might have a little bit too much, so then we can work with what's already on the paper and even that out. Okay, now we can see the progressional step even better. Maybe add a little bit more right there. Looks like it wasn't super even. Okay, now once again, more moisture or water on your brush, more pigment, mix that back in with that moisture in the lid, scrape off any excess, come in, pull down towards you, push side to side, pull down towards you using that nice flat clean edge of the brush. These are all brand new brushes, so we shouldn't have any issues with frilly little edges on our bristles. Even it out, take any excess off to even out a little bit too much right there. Okay, step right on over to the next box, doing the same thing, adding more pigment, mixing it to that water. If you think about science class and how you have a big gallon jug of water and you add 1 drop of food coloring to it, that food coloring disperses and you don't really see it. If you have a little petri dish of water with just a little bit and you add a squirt of the same amount of like food coloring to that, then you're definitely going to see the idea of the food coloring color in the little petri dish because it doesn't disperse out as much as it would in the whole gallon of water. So that's the same thing here. When you add more water, the color dissipates and you don't see it as aggressively, versus a little bit of water, you would definitely see that color. Okay, so I think I've got enough pigment mixed with the water now. Clean off a little bit excess paint on the little edge there. Come in with my next box. those look pretty close, so I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to add another layer on top. Lastly, grab a lot of pigment with a little bit of water. Scrape off the excess, come in, and do the most opaque box here. And smooth that out. We want all these boxes to have nice, smooth, even applications of paint, not splotchy. So you can see transparent to opaque. Now once again, these two boxes look a little too close. So I'm going to come in and add another layer. It's kind of dried off a little bit so I don't rip the paper. Develop a new layer of watercolor on top of what was already there after it's dried. Evenly apply it. Smooth it out. Now these two are pretty close, so now just come in with more pigment, less water. I'm not mixing it in this majority water because that's just going to dilute it. I created a new little area that's very pigmented right here. Come in, add another layer of darker orange on top. And there you have a progressional steps of transparent to opaque. 7 boxes. Most transparent, most opaque, more paint, more water, even more paint, less water, even more water, less paint, and then 50-50 right down the middle. Okay, now to clean our brush, we're going to take our water cup, press it against the bottom of your cup and swirl it around to really eliminate all the paint inside there. Okay, grab your paper towel, grab at the base and work your way like out. Don't ever come into the bristles as that will damage them and bend them. So we're working our way out, cleaning off the brush. If it's still damp, that's fine, it'll dry off. Reposition the brush how it should be, kind of with your fingers. Make sure it's not like swooping like this way or that way. Make sure it's nice and firm like that. We also never want to leave our brushes in the cup because then it will like kind of push it like this as it sits in the cup, and then that'll like force the bristles to stay the way they are, and we don't want that. We always want our bristles nice and flat like that. Okay, so that'll be the end of this video. Next video I'll show you how to do the transition of 2 colors. So if I were to mix blue and green together to get a blue-green, for our tertiary colors, we'll understand how to do that. So if I mix blue and green together, we would get blue-green. So I'll show you how to do that with blue-green right down the middle, blue on one side, green on the other, blue-green in the middle. And then our last box will consist of mixing complementary colors to get a neutral in the middle. So I could do red on this side, green on this side, and then right down the middle will be like a neutral gray. Okay? So go ahead and try this out on your first page. Make sure you have water in your cup, your palette's all clean and ready to go. And once again, we're working from transparent to opaque. And this is a strategy we will be using for all the paintings come with watercolor.